Welcome to week one of this Q&A here at Yahoo. I am John Daigle of Established the Run, and I'm excited to be here with everyone without a hard outline. Every single week, we will be here discussing what happened in Thursday Night Football, if there were a few big events, and spoiler alert, last night there was, while allowing your questions to slowly build up in the chat. And from there, we'll get to answer all of them as we spend this hour, maybe a little shorter, maybe a little bit longer together. But I know top of mind is last night's game between the Eagles and Cowboys. And there were a couple things discussed coming from that one. One of the less important ones, as we all debated, as the Eagles mentioned all offseason about limiting Saquon Barkley and having his workload potentially be cut into for breathing time from Will Shipley. I do want to note that while Will Shipley was available on the team's first two drives before he got injured on that kickoff return that he muffed at the beginning of the third drive, Saquon Barkley had only, quote unquote, only outtouched Will Shipley 8-3 on those two drives. So maybe something to look into if Will Shipley's healthy next week and we start getting more analysis on Barkley's workload for the rest of the season. But the two important things to discuss are the buy low and sell high potential that came out of that game. One, let's talk about buy low, because obviously that answer is A.J. Brown. And remember, as I move along here, feel free to ask your questions in the chat. I will pull directly from there and answer them as we move along. But in A.J. Brown, 5% target share, right? That one target coming on the team's last drive as they're really trying to just ice the game. You have to also remember that A.J. Brown had a hamstring injury he's dealt with through camp and the past month. Limited practice time, if any, in that span. And so, of course, A.J. Brown was a player that we were not benching since we drafted him in the second round, but also we're very wary of. And there are a couple of those landmines this week, right? Juwan Jennings, Jacoby Meyers, a couple of the other, Terry McLaurin, a couple of the other holdouts come to mind, given that we saw even last year in the first month of the season, remember, the elite of the elite, Jamar Chase and CeeDee Lamb. Chase, I know it seems crazy to say now in hindsight, but in the first month of the season, after his holdout, Chase had just a 17% target share with the Bengals. That is not the elite threshold we're used to, especially as he went on to finish as the wide receiver one in fantasy. CeeDee Lamb also in the first month, 20.4% target share. Again, not the elite 30% threshold we're accustomed to from a player of Lamb's caliber. So we expect A.J. Brown to get there. How long it's going to take him to recover from his hamstring injury, not sure. But again, I would imagine it's not too long. Now, in buying A.J. Brown low, that also entails buying into what the offseason analysis of the Eagles offense was. And that is a team we expect to just simply pass the ball more. Remember, last year, their 24 pass attempts per game, 26, I should say, was not only the lowest in the league, but also the fourth lowest in the last decade. Whereas in their first two seasons with A.J. Brown, so 2022 and 2023, they averaged 33 and 31 pass attempts. Last year was an entirely different offense due to having a stout defense, but more importantly, for game script reasons that we don't believe can carry over into this year. And that's why we bet on Jalen Hurts in the fourth, fifth round of our leagues as a league winner, given that only Anthony Richardson had more rushing points per game than Hurts. And then, of course, on the trickle down from the Eagles offense in A.J. Brown, Devonta Smith. So yes, we are buying low on A.J. Brown wherever you can if there's someone in your league who's worried about his hamstring injury. And then, of course, the sell high is none other than Javonte Williams. We saw him stumble for 2 touchdowns. And thank you, Kyle Siebert. I see your question coming in that I'll get to momentarily. We saw Javonte Williams stumble for 2 touchdowns. But it's unfortunately the same old Javonte Williams we saw in Denver. 3.6 yards per carry, and does handle 72% of the team's backfield touches. That's what we want. That's a threshold we'd like to see from our running back. But you also have to question how often the Cowboys are going to be in close games and being able to afford that kind of run-heavy game script. Also, was it because without even a single snap being played, the middle of the trenches opened up for Dallas, given that Dak Prescott got in a spitting bout and only one player got kicked out immediately for that competition. So for Javonte Williams, just given the pure inefficiency we saw, one run over 10 yards, 2 touchdowns, and that Jaden Blue was also inactive, he's certainly a player I want to take that touchdown equity and try to swap it at potentially his highest point as well. Remember, with Dallas being in the red zone and having 5 of 6 carries, just one running back, just one carry in general, one pass, I should say, inside the red zone in that time, we're definitely expecting them to be a pass-heavier team, not lean on Javonte Williams. For an odd game, too, given that Dallas's defense couldn't stop anyone, neither defense could. And then the lightning strike delay happens, and suddenly both defenses were outstanding. Matt Eberflus also plays an absurd 100% of snaps from zone defense, which then, of course, got the Eagles to just pepper and try to beat the Cowboys through paper cuts, not deep wounds, because that's how you beat a zone defense. 100% of snaps is such an wildly outlandish number that I do not think it's sustainable. Will the Cowboys rival in zone defense to lead the league in that department this year? Probably. And then that could also limit the explosive plays that Dak Prescott presents. But think about what the offense looks like. The CeeDee Lamb doesn't have 3 drops, etc. So Javonte Williams is a player we are selling high on if your league mates are interested in those 2 touchdowns. Now, I'll get into a couple questions before we get into Christian McCaffrey. Since we're all on the edge of our seat waiting for the next half hour, nothing matters until that point, since none of us know anything until Kyle Shanahan actually answers the call and speaks about Christian McCaffrey's injury. So Kyle Siebert does ask on Khalil Shakir, Keon Coleman, Jacoby Meyers, and Ollie Gordon starting 2. The issue with the Bills wide receivers in this particular matchup is how well the Ravens fared against Buffalo last year. And defensive coordinator Zachary Orr had Josh Allen's number. Allen, you're always starting Josh Allen. This is not for me to tell you to bench Josh Allen. Do not overthink the situation. But we're talking about matchups here. And Khalil Shakir is a player who always has a high catch rate. I know that's presented as a positive, and that's great. But he also has a high catch rate because he never goes downfield. He only gets targets near the line of scrimmage. There were 122 wide receivers, for example, to have 25 targets last year, and Khalil Shakir was 115th on that list of depth of target. He just gets peppered near the line of scrimmage and then is asked to do all the work in turning upfield. So he does have a high floor. But again, with Orr limiting Josh Allen to just 10 and 21 rushing yards in their 2 games last year, the division round included, with Josh Allen passing for less than 200 yards in both of those contests, I know it's a high total. The Ravens team total, for example, is 26.5 points. The Bills are 24, roughly, last time I looked at sports books. I don't believe that at all. I think it's going to be a lower scoring affair where 2 teams who know they're going to see each other again basically feel each other out. The Ravens will probably have to play more 11 personnel because neither Patrick Ricard, their fullback, or Isaiah Likely are going to be available Sunday night. And that's what makes Mark Andrews interesting as well. And this is a long way to answer your question, Kyle Siebert, but I'm going to keep going because I'm on a roll. Mark Andrews is the big winner here, given that in 2 career games, including last year in week 10, that Isaiah Likely has missed when the Ravens have had both of them, Andrews ran a route on 91% of dropbacks and earned a 21.5% target share. So do love Andrews in that matchup. But Khalil Shakir, again, high floor, not getting end zone targets, tied Curtis Samuel with just 3 end zone targets. That's not where he's used, which obviously limits his ceiling every single week. He's the rich man's Wan'Dale Robinson for fantasy, and that he'll get you safe points. Keon Coleman, absolutely a sleeper, one of my favorite players, and just blindly betting on a second-year breakout from Josh Allen. It's that simple. Like, there are other metrics we should look at. Keon Coleman, just 22 years old all season long now. led the Bills in end zone and red zone targets as a big-bodied X player who gets left on an island and can do damage. But again, it's really just about a second-year player with Josh Allen. Close your eyes, hold your nose, bet on that, and let's see what happens. In this kind of matchup, though, I am admittedly worried given that Coleman has been limited all week. We're still expecting him to play, but limited. And also remember, Shakir dealt with that high ankle sprain throughout August in training camp. Has practiced in full now and Thursday and Friday. Again, fully expected to play. But I am someone having done this for so long, 10 plus years now, because I'm old. We know the curse of the high ankle sprain and how it limits players' efficiency, at least out the gates, the first 2 to 4 games, whenever they experience it, and then the return. And then, of course, Kyle is also asking about Jakobi Meyers or Ollie Gordon. I will say, in Ollie Gordon, remember that Raheem Mostert overlapped with Achane for 18 full games the past 2 years. And in those 18 full games, Raheem Mostert averaged 10.5 touches and outcarried Achane inside the 5-yard line in those 18 contests. But that was Raheem Mostert, who was also one of the most explosive players in the league. When he's healthy, he's never healthy, but when he is, he's lightning. And this is a day 3 rookie who, yes, exploded in the preseason and all the camp hype has gone favorable for, but does that amount to double-digit touches? I'm not sure. It's such a wide and volatile range of outcomes that I don't want to bet on it in week 1. And outside of deep 12-team leagues where we're desperate, or 14-team leagues, I do think starting Ollie Gordon is getting too cute for week 1. So I will go Jakobi Meyers and Khalil Shakir. Jakobi Meyers, I did not even mention. Brock Bowers got all the hype, and rightfully so. But remember, whenever the Raiders traded Davante Adams to the Jets last year, whenever they overlapped, it was Brock Bowers led the team with a 30% target share. Jakobi Meyers was right there behind him with a 26% target share as a fringe wide receiver 2 weekly. I understand Meyers was not treated as a wide receiver 2 or even wide receiver 3 in your home leagues, but that was incorrect. And that's why Jakobi Meyers was such a steal in the 7th, 8th round, especially in full PPR formats, because that's the kind of player he is. It was a hold-in for Meyers, I should also say. Didn't miss too much practice time, requested more money from the Raiders, did not get it, and then stood on business and returned to practice after that. So it really just boils down to what we believe that environment will be when we're talking about starting Jakobi Meyers over Coleman as sleeper pick and Ollie Gordon. And I do think the environment's going to be fun in that New England Raiders game. The Raiders let's start with the Patriots side of the ball and talking about Jakobi Meyers, since I already gave you your answer, Kyle. And Lance, I see your question on tonight. We're absolutely going to get to that. But for the Patriots, just remember that Josh McDaniels rightfully got dunked on in the past year for being a miserable head coach. But in his last 10 seasons, exclusively of a play caller, when he was allowed to finish the year, and this includes 2 seasons with the Raiders, those offenses finished in the top half of the league in EPA per play, so we're extremely efficient offenses, in 9 of 10 seasons. The only outlier in that 10-season sample would be the Cam Newton year, where the Patriots still won 7 games, despite having a quarterback who did not toss double-digit touchdowns, but led his position, I should say, in rushing touchdowns, because Josh McDaniels efficiently schemed him for a team high of carries inside the 10 and 5-yard line. He just got the best and the most out of the personnel he was given and that Cam Newton passing offense for the Patriots that year. And I think that's what Josh McDaniels is about to do with the Patriots and getting the best out of everyone. Drake Maye in his 10 full starts was the QB 10 in fantasy points, and now gets an upgrade in surrounding cast, including Stephon Diggs, who's practicing in full and is going to play after last year's season-ending torn ACL early on in the year. And then, of course, rookie Kyle Williams, who is still buried behind Demario Douglas, Hunter Henry, and then the great Travion Henderson, who averaged 7.3 yards per touch in his final year with Ohio State. All these players should do quite well against a Raiders depth chart I don't even need to tell you about, but go look at it right now. Google Raiders depth chart, look at the linebackers room, look at the secondary. And although Pete Carroll is the kind of coach like a Mike Vrabel who can get the most out of the least talent, week one may be too tall of an ask. Plus, Josh McDaniels is about to try to score 40 points on the team that I'm not going to say incorrectly wronged him or justifiably wronged him. McDaniels deserved to be wronged after he made his players and coordinators a scapegoat for his own flaws as a head coach. But McDaniels is about to try and put up 40 plus on the Raiders for revenge. So I think that's going to be a negative skating trip for Las Vegas, and that's going to be great for the scoring outcome there, Jacoby Myers included. So Khalil Shakir, Jacoby Myers for me, and that 2v2 question. Lance asked, what do I think about Isaiah Pacheco and Hollywood Brown tonight? Hollywood Brown's not a player I'm starting. Last year, remember, Brown recorded a career low in depth of target, averaging 72% of his catches within 9 yards of the line of scrimmage. We always think of Hollywood. That's how he got the name. Hollywood was the guy with the Ravens who ran down the seam and just beat the safeties deep one-on-one over the top every time. That's not how he was used in Kansas City, as Kansas City typically, outside of Xavier Worthy, makes everyone shallower receivers and asks you to do everything after the catch or break your route and run upfield whenever Patrick Mahomes breaks the play and escapes the pocket. So Hollywood Brown was just used differently. Not necessarily someone I'm excited about. I understand you probably drafted him in deeper 12-team leagues, 14 leagues. But Hollywood Brown is just someone that could have like 7 targets tonight, but a 5 for 35 outcome on those 7 targets is absolutely in his range of possibilities, given that, again, he was used as a different player in Kansas City. For Isaiah Pacheco, I am a little more worried than public consensus. Like, it's wide. I talk about Ollie Gordon having a wide range of outcomes, but for Isaiah Pacheco, as someone who returned from injury last year and was outright bad, so much so that he totaled only 16 touches in the postseason, they basically just didn't use him at all. And remember, Kareem Hunt not only led this team in carries inside the 5-yard line, which limits Pacheco's ceiling, but also those carries from inside the 5-yard line, that tied Bijan Robinson for 9th in the league. Kareem Hunt is the short yardage back in this situation, which again takes away from Pacheco's outcome. There's a lot that could happen with Pacheco's workload tonight. Could he have 20-plus touches? Absolutely. And be an RB2 for you. Could he, though, just be a rotational player where Kareem Hunt gets the short yardage role and either Brashad Smith or Elijah Mitchell are sprinkled in? Since last year, no team had a lower rate of 10-yard runs. No team had a less explosive running game than the Chiefs, who could be looking for other answers than Pacheco. Yes, all of those things could happen tonight. So I personally am on the RB3, low-end RB2 scale of Isaiah Pacheco. But I will let you know, like, unbiasedly, he's also a player that really didn't come up in my drafts much just because I was more infatuated with that tier of wide receivers. So I don't have much, if any, Isaiah Pacheco everywhere. So low-end RB2, but I do think we should be slightly more skeptical than what's being led on. Xavier Worthy, on the other hand, as Kyle asked, I am not worried about, because this is the run out for Worthy. It's that he is a player. It was only 58 plays last year where he overlapped with Rashee Rice. But on those 58 plays, he had a 19% target share. Rashee Rice, who dominates targets and is an entirely different and better player, had a 40% target share. So the way we should view it is, let's take advantage of what Worthy brings to the table and closing out the year as a fringe wide receiver 1. He is unanimously Kansas City's wide receiver 1 for the next 6 games. So let's not even talk about Worthy. But then let's revisit this in week 6, because there will be a sell high opportunity for Xavier Worthy, and we are going to have to take advantage of that, in my opinion, because Rashee Rice is the one who returns and absolutely dominates targets. So 6 games, you get Worthy as a fringe wide receiver 1, and you are absolutely starting him tonight. That tall guy asks, would you drop Jared Goff and start Trevor Lawrence? And I would. I see that total in both games, honestly, creeping up. And this is what I look for when we're talking about hairline decisions in start sits, like the other metrics that make us lean towards a different player. And I think the situation with Trevor Lawrence passing against the Panthers, that I expect to be an up-tempo game with zero defense on both sides of the ball, as the Panthers and Jaguars finished 31st and 32nd in EPA per pass last year. Two very inefficient passing defenses. I expect Trevor Lawrence to have a better outcome than Jared Goff, that I just don't know what to expect. Jared Goff, I know everyone mentions the indoor-outdoor splits. I've always found those lazy. I hate Jared Goff indoor-outdoor splits. It has always, for his entire career, been about just the pocket crumble, because Jared Goff under pressure and from a clean pocket are two entirely different players. It's Jekyll and Hyde. And the concern is not only losing Ben Johnson, obviously, to the Bears, who helped maximize all the talent in Detroit's offense, but remember, the Lions also lost 3 starting interior offensive linemen this offseason, including all-pro center Frank Ragnow. And that's going to make a big difference, in my opinion, especially if Micah Parsons, who led the league in pressure rate as an individual, if he were to play, that's going to make a big difference for Jared Goff's environment. So I see the total going up, but I just think Jordan Love escaping the injury report with a thumb injury. We're waiting on Jaden Reed to see if he's going to play. Dontavian Wicks is banged up, is probably going to play, but still dealing with an injury. There's so many things going on in that game. So many different pieces not coming together. I think the market is off in that one. And I really do perceive it as more of an under game where Dan Campbell tries to establish it and slow it down with David Montgomery and Jahmyr Gibbs. So I'm worried about Goff personally all year long, but we're starting in this one. And so I'd much rather ride it out with a rushing quarterback and Trevor Lawrence and bet on the matchup over Jared Goff. Colston Loveland or Brenton Strange, half PPR. It's always fun when you get the questions from the same tier of tight ends. And honestly, this year after George Kittle, everyone from Sam Laporta to Hunter Henry is the same player. It's all the same tier of tight ends. And so you're strictly playing matchups. And Colston Loveland, it's an interesting spot because the Bears drafted him over Tyler Warren in the first round, knowing he was going to take all offseason to ramp up. He is that intriguing kind of player that, for his career, 42% route rate from the slot, or snaps, I should say, from the slot, 19% out wide. He even had 22 career snaps from the backfield. Like, he can just play everywhere, honestly. But as a rookie in his first game, and Ben Johnson's first game, does that projection outperform Brenton Strange, who I would at least guess is going to have a higher on-field participation than Colston Loveland? But will Colston Loveland be more damaging? Will he be more efficient than Brenton Strange? I think we're splitting hairs. I like both of them in the high-end tight end 2 range. I will say Colston Loveland. But again, we are absolutely splitting hairs with the same tier of players and just playing the matchup. And week 1 for rookies are always skeptical. But I'm thinking in a situation, if I had both, I would play Colston Loveland because I drafted him higher. And Brenton Strange went undrafted in a lot of leagues. A trade question from Rare. Would you trade Achane and Guerrendo? Oh, Achane and, Guerrendo or Gordon for Ashton Jeanty. And the answer is no, just because I think Achane in general, without even factoring in Guerrendo and Ollie Gordon, Achane I have over Ashton Jeanty all year long. Achane is a candidate to be the overall RB1 in fantasy. So I definitely would not trade that player regardless of the package you are putting with him for Ashton Jeanty. It's that simple. Josh Shen asks, start Jordan Mason, Keenan Allen, Tank Bigsby, or I'm assuming Keon Coleman. And I would actually, in this scenario, let's just walk through this here. Not Keon Coleman, right? He's a sleeper, but he's not someone that, unless we have to in leagues that have 3 starting wide receivers and multiple flexes, someone that we want to bank on in that kind of matchup. We want to see it, and I would happily Keon Coleman break out and have 20 points on my bench this week. I would take that, given that the other outcome is Keon Coleman being droppable in week 2. So Keon Coleman's not a player I'm looking to start. Please let him break out on my bench. That way we're at least on the correct path for having a sleeper. So we're basically boiling this down to, given the ambiguity in Jacksonville's backfield, we're basically asking Keenan Allen or Jordan Mason. I'm going to take Tank Bigsby out of the picture here. And Jordan Mason can fall forward for a touchdown and could mix in for, I'm going to guess his ceiling case in week 1 is a true 50-50 timeshare with Aaron Jones. Aaron Jones, the player who I think was an easy fade throughout the season, the offseason in our fantasy drafts, just because similar to how it was easy to fade Raheem Mostert after he was being drafted in the 8th round, and he was the RB8 in points per game, leading the league in rushing touchdowns. Like, that was Raheem Mostert's age 31 season, the most carries he ever received in his career. It was obvious we should not chase that whatsoever. Aaron Jones is kind of coming off. It's not apples to apples, but a similar season. And that it's his age 30 season. It's the first time ever he's handled over 300 touches. He had 306 touches. And even then, it was a career worst in yards per touch. So we're asking, can he replicate an anomaly, a career high in touches again? But then also, is he trending towards being more efficient if that anomaly hits? It's a lot of question marks that I believe leads us to fade Aaron Jones if you're still drafting. You're probably not drafting anymore. But in the case of Jordan Mason, at least for week 1, we know he's going to be the short yardage back. Wait, I shouldn't say we know. We think he's going to be the short yardage back, given that Aaron Jones, his 13 carries inside the 5-yard line last year resulted in -2 yards and a fumble. Not great, Bob. So Jordan Mason, we expect to take on that bruising short yardage role. But we say all this to say Keenan Allen's matchup is better. I know he gets made fun of for eating too much P-quads, even though, to be fair to Keenan Allen, have you ever had P-quads? You too would put on a few extra pounds if you played in Chicago. But still to earn, despite being made fun of, still to earn 23.5% target share around DJ Moore and Rome Odunze in a very bad offense, right? So he proved he can still earn targets last year. He has rapport with Justin Herbert, known rapport, and the Chiefs led the league in catches per game allowed to opposing slot receivers. It's a great matchup for Keenan Allen tonight. So I'm taking that, especially in PPR leagues, and I'm playing Keenan Allen. I'm not going to question the other matchups. Start Michael Penix Jr. or Drake Maye. Ron T asks, and I think that's an easy answer. It is quite obviously Drake Maye, in my opinion. Again, you get the higher floor from Penix because in his 10 full starts, Drake Maye added 4.2 rushing points per game. That's how that fringe QB1 tier becomes QB1. This is what our friends, late round quarterback himself, JT Zachariason, Sharp Football's Rich Rebar, they built their brands on running quarterbacks in the late rounds. Drake Maye was that last year. Oddly, Drake Maye was that this year whenever Drake Maye projects as a top 12 quarterback. So you just take that rushing floor with the better surrounding cast and better play caller. This is not the Patriots of last year. This is going to be Josh McDaniels' Patriots, and I think they're going to have a lot of success beginning this week at home against the Raiders. Not only that, but Falcons game, I'm excited to watch it because remember, Caleb McGarry, all-pro right tackle, out for the season. And usually we talk about left tackles being the most important player. But in playing on the right side for a left-handed quarterback in Penix, That's Penix's blind side. And Todd Bowles also, every season he's coached in the league, has had a top 5 blitz rate. Like, Bowles is coming in this game. The Bucs are absolutely going to start and end that matchup this Sunday, attacking the right side and seeing how the Falcons answer. And it's a very, very small sample. It was actually only 28 dropbacks against the blitz Michael Penix had last year, but he was bad. 6.5 yards per attempt. He was really bad against the blitz last year. So we're going to see. There's a wide range of outcomes for that game. Penix led the league in air yards per target as someone who launches downfield and has 3 full starts. So we think we're going to get some exciting action and fireworks over the top. But I don't know, because Bowles, the house is coming in that game. So that's something I'll definitely be monitoring in that matchup. Cedric Tillman, Marcus Golden, or Chris Olave in full PPR. That one's easy. Matthew Golden, I should say. That one's easy. It's Chris Olave. We're going to rule out Cedric Tillman. Perhaps he has a good game. Remember, Cedric Tillman was actually better than Jerry Jeudy in the 4 full games Tillman played after the Browns traded Amari Cooper. Tillman was targeted on a higher percent of his routes than Jerry Jeudy in that time. Then Tillman got injured, a season-ending concussion, and only then would Jameis Winston to Jerry Jeudy break out. Like, it's not even a universe far, far away. It's like just the next universe over. If even, maybe it's the same universe, honestly, that Cedric Tillman is better than Jerry Jeudy. And so Cedric Tillman also a sleeper, but again, we want our sleepers to break out on our bench because that means we're on the right path and we don't have to shuffle our bench. We don't want to take chances over the known guys in week 1 for the most part. There are, of course, some anomaly cases we can get to, but Cedric Tillman, we're leaving on our bench. Matthew Golden, excited about Matthew Golden, especially if Jaden Reed's foot injury he may play through is going to linger, but I'm starting Chris Olave in PPR leagues. First of all, we're expecting this back half of the Saints defense is terrible. Let's just start there. Kyler Murray, I understand there are a lot of question marks, especially coming off a career low in rushing points per game. We drafted Kyler Murray high, usually, just because we get that added rushing bonus, and that was not the case last year. But the Saints defense is so bad that I think we're going to get a breakout game here for Kyler, James Conner especially, Marvin Harrison Jr., and Trey McBride. That's naturally going to force the Saints into a passing and negative game script. And because of that, I think we're going to see Chris Olave have immense success. Also, Chris Olave, with Spencer Rattler last year, his only 100-yard game. Chris Olave was really good with Spencer Rattler last season. So I like Chris Olave quite more than Matthew Golden in week 1. Engineer asked the question I thought we were going to get earlier, honestly. But let's talk about Brian Robinson and the 49ers backups as we wait on the Christian McCaffrey injury news. First of all, if Christian McCaffrey plays, we're obviously starting him. Don't overthink it. You drafted Christian McCaffrey for this situation. Does it hurt worse that it's in week 1? Yes. That sucks that it's happening right now when everyone's tuned in and we're all hyper reacting to every inch of news that the cavemen did not mean for our brains to ever handle. But you are starting Christian McCaffrey if he plays. That's simple. Don't even think twice. Also, remember, Kyle Shanahan does not care about Christian McCaffrey's injuries. Even in last year, missing half the season, he comes back. He's far less explosive and less efficient. And in Christian McCaffrey's 3 full games, he still returns to out-touch Jordan Mason 56-7. If Christian McCaffrey plays, he gets every touch. Now, the question about Brian Robinson is that the player that steps in if McCaffrey were out? And I'm not sure. You were absolutely picking up Brian Robinson, right? That's the contingency player, the direct option we should have in mind. But he as a football player does not overlap and bring to the table what McCaffrey does. We're talking about an individual who for his career, 3%, 7.1%, and 5.5% target shares as a below average pass catcher. Definitely going to play the Jordan Mason role in having 12 to 15 carries as a between the tackles early down bruiser. That's what he does. But then does Isaac Guerrendo do Isaac Guerrendo, as I speak English in my head, and Jordan James, their rookie, get in the mix as a pass catching role? And I think the answer is yes. So yes, Brian Robinson is going to garner the most fab among all three backup running backs in San Francisco, but you should pick up all of them in order: Robinson, Guerrendo, Jordan James. But in 12-team leagues, literally all three should be picked up because we don't know. Brian Robinson probably has the highest touchdown equity. He's the guy they would use for carries inside the 5-yard line. But again, we don't know. So much so that the biggest winner is probably Brock Purdy and everyone, even though I'm expecting the 49ers to really struggle in this game. The Seahawks, arguably the best defense in the league, and plus think about what we have here. Robert Saleh going back to the 49ers and coaching in this spot. Known players, the 49ers are going to start 3 rookies at least, but coaching with Kyle Shanahan, it's division rivals. I really expect this game to get dragged down to the mud and be one of the lower scoring contests of the week. Juwan Jennings coming up a holdout. We talked about holdouts and how we're worried about them at the top of the show. So I'm worried about the 49ers in general. I think it's going to be a low scoring game this week, but pick up all the 49ers running backs, literally, because we just don't know the outcome. We have no idea. If Christian McCaffrey were out, you can definitely start Brian Robinson, whereas I can't say the same thing about Isaac Guerrendo. But if Guerrendo were to then outscore Brian Robinson, that would not shock me whatsoever. We should prepare for everything, and McCaffrey's out. All right. Nick Swank asks, Emeka Egbuka, Xavier Worthy, Cortland Sutton, pick 2, and in this instance, I'm actually going to start Xavier Worthy and Cortland Sutton and bench Emeka Egbuka. It's your fault, Nick, for drafting a good team. You're putting yourself in this situation, so hat tip to you. But when it comes to the 2 players who earn targets and better matchups than Emeka Egbuka, then I would much rather just bench the rookie in week 1 and see what happens. Obviously, Egbuka is going to be a great player, especially with Jalen McMillan potentially out for the year. Chris Godwin, the news gets worse literally every passing month. So who knows when he'll be back? But even so, we're talking about 2 top 24, fringe top 24 players in Xavier Worthy and Cortland Sutton. So you start them over Egbuka and don't think twice. And whatever happens, happens. It's that close. Also, Nick Swank has a QB question in Jordan Love, Justin Fields, or Drake Maye. Honestly, with Dak Prescott, you're probably not starting any of those players. And I don't personally keep backup quarterbacks in fantasy. I don't keep backup quarterbacks or tight ends on my bench. I think they get in the way of the Isaac Guerendos of the world, of the Will Shipleys of the world. Players who, when a starter gets injured ahead of them, then that backup becomes much more valuable than a backup quarterback and tight end. And that's why I keep the 1 injury away list and the rankings at establishthorun.com. For that reason, I rank those backup running backs. So I personally don't even pick up backup quarterbacks and tight ends. But if you want to, I still have Drake Maye over Jordan Love and Justin Fields rest of season. 10-man league. Gabriel asks, we are starting either Tyreek Hill, a flex and a running back between Tyreek Hill, Ken Walker, Alvin Kamara. He mentions a Jones, even though think about how many Jones are in the world in football too. DJ Moore or Emeka Egbuka. That is easily Tyreek Hill and Alvin Kamara. Alvin Kamara over Ken Walker, just because Kenneth Walker was sat in instances throughout training camp, and they mentioned it was for injury management reasons, his health program to keep him healthy. But also he was dealing with a foot injury at times too. He has a chronic history of foot injuries. He's the type of physical player where it could get re-aggravated. We already talked about how I expect that game with so many different outcomes possible. I expect it to be slow and low scoring. I think Seattle will actually win that game too, honestly. one of those that like I wouldn't be shocked to see at all, just because the matchup, how it works out for them. But also Zach Charbonnet looms not too far in the distance. And remember, for as explosive of a player Ken Walker gets talked about as, and he is, Zach Charbonnet actually had a higher rate of 15-yard runs in his 6 starts last year than Ken Walker had in his starts, because Zach Charbonnet's good. And with a new offensive coordinator, Clint Kubiak, how much of the pie does Zach Charbonnet suddenly eat into? Is it more? Which then takes away from Walker's ceiling. That's something I understand. A lot of people are going to be in a position where they don't have Kenneth Walker and Alvin Kamara, so they don't have to worry about it at all. For me, though, I take Kamara's workload with no competition, just Kendry Miller and rookie Devin Neal behind him. Also, Spencer Rattler in his starts last year, he had the 7th highest target rate to running backs. So Kamara, even a negative game script, we're expected to see out there and constantly eat targets to get more fantasy points for us. So quite easily for me, Tyreek Hill indoors and Alvin Kamara. And then cross your fingers on Tyreek Hill, because it is a terrific matchup. We even saw now with Darren Waller out, we go back to the same target tree in 2023, because no Jonnu Smith, obviously, after he was traded to Pittsburgh in the offseason. The 2023 target share was Tyreek Hill, 31% target share, Jalen Waddle, 22%, Devon Achane, 10%. No one else was in double digits. And that's why they were so explosive in 2023. Jonnu Smith, obviously, once the offensive line fell apart, Jonnu Smith then gets involved for a 19% target share last year, because Tua has to get the ball out as quickly as possible. And maybe that's the case in this one, because the Colts front 7 has dogs up there. They're going to get after it in Miami's offensive line. But also Austin Jackson's healthy. The Miami offensive line is the healthiest it's been since last year. Maybe the healthiest it's going to be all year long. Again, indoor environment against what I think will be a poor secondary, even though they have a great pass rush in the Colts defense. So I'm betting on Tyreek Hill for one last ride here, and we will reassess in week 2 based on what happens. JR is asking a defense question for next week, and I got to be honest with you, JR, I absolutely do not look at week 2 on the Fridays of week 1. Not my forte. We take this thing one day at a time. Otherwise, I will go clinically insane. So I'm going to just quickly answer with no logic whatsoever. So it's a warning to you, JR, that I would pick up the Commanders defense and start them weeks 1 and 2. Travis Hunter or Jameson Williams in the flex. And I think there are enough questions about Travis Hunter's usage to bench him in week 1 and start Jameson Williams instead. Last year, Jameson Williams was the first time he's run. He's the first time he's had 1,000 yards, I should say. And that's because it was the most routes he's run literally since high school. Like in college, remember, he was injured all the time, so he didn't get that amount. Last year, finally healthy, runs the most routes he's run since high school, goes over 1,000 yards, has a 17.5% target share. And that's why also Amon-Ra St. Brown not only had a career low target share under Ben Johnson, but Sam Laporta was unusable for half the season. He bumped up in the second half of the year, but Sam Laporta was unusable because Jameson Williams ate into a piece of the pie, which is worrisome again for Sam Laporta, which is why I argued over Established a Run all offseason that the ADPs between George Kittle and then the next guy, Sam Laporta, should have been much further off this offseason, much further apart, because there's such a big difference between getting George Kittle as your tight end, as the third tight end off the board in the 3rd round, compared to Sam Laporta. You're just filling a spot at that point. Just wait for Tucker Kraft, 8 rounds later instead of Sam Laporta. So I'm going back to Jameson Williams, who can separate in what is practically his 2nd year in the league, especially since he's a walking 10-yard play. Just too many questions surrounding Travis Hunter, where if I have a question mark like this, you're not bitching Travis Hunter for everyone. But if I have a question mark like a proven player like Jameson Williams, who's just developing and getting better, or Travis Hunter, I'm going to wait to see the week 1 usage for Hunter and go from there. Drop Darnell Mooney for Guerrendo. No. Sounds like Darnell Mooney's going to play. Darnell Mooney was also one of those guys who was a tremendous sleeper in both best ball and redraft leagues this year and just provides more value than a backup like Isaac Guerrendo. So, nope, we're not dropping Darnell Mooney. Start 2, Davante Adams, Matthew Golden, Tet McMillan, Rome Odunze, easily. Davante Adams and Tet McMillan, quite easily. Again, the player everyone talked about because it pushed up the board this week was Xavier Worthy following the trade of Adam Thielen to Minnesota. But sometimes the best reactions are no reactions at all because Tet McMillan was the winner, obviously, in that deal. The fact that we can now have a player who literally comped to Mike Evans coming out, and some coaches were out on him entirely just because of the off-field work ethic and the fact his agent didn't warn him ahead of time, hey, you shouldn't show up to interviews and tell the coaches you don't watch film. Not a great sign. I understand that. But that's why he got pushed down boards by football guys. However, his actual profile as a player is Mike Evans, as a big body guy who can not only break himself open downfield, but also make contested catches. And now the target share goes up for him naturally because we're taking Adam Thielen off the field. Adam Thielen, who was a wide receiver 2 or 3 whenever he returned and played with Bryce Young last year. Tet also talked about it in this amazing environment with the Panthers and Jaguars. I know it's crazy to say that. That is not a sentence that should come out of anyone's mouth unless there is something wrong with you. That it's an amazing environment between the Panthers and Jaguars, but it's going to be fun. It's going to be a really fun game. I can't wait. Which also means you should probably stack it in Yahoo DFS this week. And then Davante Adams over Matthew Golden. Lots of things could happen in the Rams-Texans game. And that includes Matthew Stafford being completely banged up, the immortal chamber not working, his back goes out. Suddenly we see Jimmy Garoppolo in the second half. Everything fails. Jared Verse single-handedly tears apart the Texans' offensive line. 6-3 ball game. That's it. That could happen. But also, I think given what the Texans did this offseason, the other range of outcome for that game is fireworks. Nick Caley comes over from Los Angeles. He's obviously familiar with both the Rams offense and defense. And we're hoping, it's just wish casting. We have to cross our fingers. But we're hoping he takes what he learned from McVay and transitions it to Houston. And more 3 wide receiver sets, even without Christian Kirk this week. More passing the ball, especially since the early down runners they have in place of Joe Mixon are not efficient. They're not the players they want to lean on. So CJ Stroud going heavily and forcing an up-tempo, pass-heavy game altogether on the other side from Davante Adams and Matthew Stafford and Puka Nacua, that's something that could happen. So I'm going to start Davante Adams and Tet McMillan for sure over Matthew Golden and Rome Odunze. Let's see. We have a question about Ja'Cory Croskey-Merritt. Oh, gosh, Rare. How are you already? Rare plays in a 32-team league where he has to start Ja'Cory Croskey-Merritt or Donte Thornton. In that case, I'm starting Ja'Cory Croskey-Merritt easily. But I will tell you, in week 1, am I worried about JCM? Yeah. Bill Croskey-Merritt, I should say. Yeah, I'm very worried. Even like the market at sportsbooks, which are pretty telling, we're talking about like 34.5 rushing yards. We're talking about a committee with Chris Rodriguez, who was actually pretty good. He comes from a different coaching regime. He was Ron Rivera's guy. But Chris Rodriguez is like a perfectly capable league average back that's not going to excite us or win anything in fantasy football for us, but does just enough to cannibalize everyone, especially in week 1 when veterans usually get the preference over rookies. So like I will start Ja'Cory Croskey-Merritt, but that's only because Donte Thornton could be absolutely nothing. And behind Brock Bowers, Michael Mayer, and Trey Tucker. When we're talking about 12 personnel, and the Raiders would have to go to 3 wide sets just to get him on the field. He's also a rookie wide receiver in week 1, whereas at least Bill Croskey-Merritt gets the ball handed to him. Wide receivers do not get balls handed to them. Clearly, they have to earn targets. Can Donte Thornton earn targets in the NFL? We're still questioning that. So that's quite easily Bill Croskey-Merritt. Half PPR, Olave or Etienne at flex. That for me is Olave for all the reasons mentioned earlier. And so I still question and would prefer to see who wins out in Jacksonville's backfield among Travis Etienne, Tank Bigsby, and Bashal Tutin. And not everyone does this, but I personally am going to extend it further than that and say, and LaQuint Allen, who coming out of college was one of this class's best pass catching backs. I think it could be four-headed at most, but at the very least three-headed, and we just don't know what's going to happen there. So I'm still going to play Chris Olave over Travis Etienne. Jesse Varela is worried because he had A.J. Brown, and he needs a flex between Nick Chubb and Keenan Allen, and it is very easily Keenan Allen. Jesse, I stopped there. I'm not worried about Nick Chubb whatsoever. In terms of Keenan Allen's matchup, given what I talked about earlier and how I think this is a favorable spot for Keenan Allen tonight. So I'm going to take those points with Keenan Allen. Although the Texans could lean on Nick Chubb, I do wonder what that means. And could it just be then 14 carries for 61 yards, right? Which gets you nowhere even. And that's why in fantasy football, we always talk about when you're looking to split the differences and target the higher ceiling running backs, literally for fantasy football, targets are worth 1.5, carries are worth 1 point. And Nick Chubb for his entire career has never earned targets. So I am very, very worried about Nick Chubb in general, but I'm not going to play him over Keenan Allen. This guy asks DeAndre Swift or David Montgomery. And the run up for DeAndre Swift this offseason was at least good enough to start him in this game. No Roschon Johnson, it looks like, in this matchup on Monday night, which leaves practically two healthy backs. They might mix in Travis Homer or another pass-catching back they have. But DeAndre Swift got the perfect run out, and only day 3 Kyle Monangai being added to this backfield. Monangai, who also wasn't really a receiving back in college. His calling card was an early down bruiser who didn't fumble the ball whatsoever. And is that better than DeAndre Swift? I don't know. That could mean that Swift's touches inside the 5-yard line could be capped. His ceiling could then be limited. But I'm not going to worry about that in week 1. I'm just going to start DeAndre Swift. Understanding the depth chart works in his favor. Also, DeAndre Swift or Aaron Jones. In that case, although I did talk about worrying about Aaron Jones, I think I would start Aaron Jones for the pass-catching equity over DeAndre Swift. But it's really close. I think I prefer, though, in J.J. McCarthy's first NFL game, the Vikings being much more conservative and not really opening it up for him until later on in the second half of the season. Half PPR flex, Travis Hunter or Dylan Sampson, very easily Travis Hunter. Not worried about that at all. Like we talked about earlier, there are situations where I will not bench Travis Hunter. I will bench him for Jameis Williams. I will not bench him for Dylan Sampson. I believe this is a matchup where Jerome Ford, given, again, veteran preference always in week 1, Jerome Ford is the player to roster there, although even he is closer to a RB3 flex. Let's see here. RL asks Travis Hunter or Amarian Hampton, and the answer is Amarian Hampton, given the run out for him. Najee Harris is going to play, but what does that mean? Like, how many carries will Najee Harris get? And although, like, maybe we've confirmed he has 2 eyes, there hasn't been a single photo or video this offseason since he's had the fireworks incident where he hasn't had on a visor or sunglasses. So I'm not confirming. I'm not sure. Until someone can prove he has 2 eyes. We're talking about a running back potentially with at least 1 injured eye. So I don't know. I have no idea, no pun intended, what that looks like at all for Najee Harris. He should stay glued to our benches, and we're expecting Amarian Hampton to get 15 to 18 touches in this game. Now, that is RB2 worthy. That kind of workload for a player who practically profiles as Saquon Barkley, right? Now, to zoom out a little bit, even though we are starting him in managed leagues as an RB2 to zoom out, the matchup also is concerning because the Chiefs only allowed one running back all season in the regular season to go for over 80 rushing yards, and it was Jerome Ford. And Jerome Ford only did that because he had a 62-yard run in the second half. That's it. If it wasn't for that run, then no running back reaches 80 rushing yards against them. The Chiefs' run defense is perplexing and superb. So it's a terrible matchup for Marion Hampton. But we're talking about one of the most explosive rookies in this class, the consensus RB1 if Ashton Jeanty didn't exist, and also a player with that profile getting 18-plus touches. So we're going to start in Marion Hampton and let the chips fall where they may. However the dominoes fall, screw it. At least we have Hampton in the lineup. Drop Ray Davis or Tootin for Guerrendo, and you're just shuffling backups at that point, right? And no, just because if Christian McCaffrey, think about it, right? And this is why you asked me. I'm going to think about it for you. How about that, Harlem? I'll do the work. If James Cook goes down, we saw Ray Davis get every touch against the Jets last year. 110 yards from scrimmage and a touchdown. Was amazing. So that's a player who steps right in as a top 12 running back. If Tank Bigsby or Travis Etienne go down, at least we know with Bashal Tootin being quite literally the most explosive running back in combine history, literally, since they've begun testing metrics. At least with Tootin, he's the type of player that could win an every down role. With Isaac Guerrendo, if Christian McCaffrey were to go down, if he's injured, and it doesn't sound like he is, honestly. Sounds like we're actually getting some positive news filtering in now. But if Christian McCaffrey goes down, Guerrendo still has a little bit of a hump, a roadblock to beat, and Brian Robinson, who could cap his ceiling inside the 5-yard line. So we're going to take our chances on the guys who could win 3-down rolls. And Guerendo's still a good pickup. But since we have to rank backup running backs now, it's still Davis and Tootin over Guerrendo. Again, sometimes the best reactions are to not react at all. RGQ asked thoughts on Judkins since he was cleared of his alleged incidents this offseason, cleared in court, and now it boils down to getting him under contract for the Browns. And although I expect the Browns to be a miserable offense all offseason or all season long, Judkins is far and away the best player they can throw out there the moment he signs in their running back room. So I expect Judkins to absolutely take away from Jerome Ford and Dylan Sampson, which I think could make Jerome Ford a sell high candidate after this season, because Judkins profiles as Nick Chubb. He doesn't earn targets. He did not in college. That was Travion Henderson's role. But he's a tank that goes 15 yards at a time. Again, that's Nick Chubb in his prime. He will bowl you over between the tackles. And so Judkins is a player that shouldn't be available, like at all, on your waiver wires. He should have been drafted, and he should be stashed with the first month of the season, somewhere in the first month being the perspective here, not week 1. So you should pick him up because he shouldn't be available on waivers. It's that simple. Will he even be out there week 2? I don't know. Maybe not. If he forced me to guess which direction, I would say no. But for the time being, Judkins, the answer is he shouldn't be on waivers. That simple. Pearsall or Olave PPR is a really interesting one. And you can't even use all the splits from last year on and off the field for the 49ers because there's so many things going on. Trent Williams on and off the field. Brock Purdy on and off the field. No Deebo Samuel this season. George Kittle was injured. Christian McCaffrey played 3.5 games. It's not even worth talking about what happens, with Pearsall on and off the field. But he's a former first-round player who's now had a full offseason and one of the more explosive options in that entire draft, playing with an offense that, assuming McCaffrey's out there, is at full strength. Do I think that game is going to be lower scoring and muddy? Yes. That's my personal view of it. But in terms of who to start, we are starting Ricky Pearsall still because we believe he's at full strength. And unlike Juwan Jennings, did not hold out. Pearsall's there and ready to play. So I still like his upside case over Chris Olave, although I think both are good plays. And finally, I promised you an hour. I gave you an hour. And we're going to discuss here. We're going to finish with Clash Star and Marvin Harrison Jr. or Jerry Jeudy. And I think the splits for Jeudy are wide enough to bank on Marvin Harrison Jr. instead. MHJ, who, by the way, bulked up to 220 pounds this offseason in a class with Malik Neighbors last year and Brian Thomas, right? Remember, just zoom out for a second. Don't think about how poor he played as a rookie. Zoom out. Remember, Marvin Harrison Jr. was still unequivocally the best prospect in last year's class at his position. He bulks up to look like Terrell Owens now. And it's not only an indoor game in a new season where he put on these extra pounds and explosiveness, but also Jerry Jeudy last year with Jameis Winston, the wide receiver 2 in points per game. With Dorian Thompson-Robinson, the wide receiver 34 in points per game. And with Deshaun Watson, the wide receiver 71 in points per game. Jerry Jeudy needed Jameis Winston to open up the offense and Cedric Tillman to go away for Jerry Jeudy to break out. And that's why I'm worried about Jerry Jeudy's prospects as a whole, because Cedric Tillman is there looming as a potential sleeper for the 2025 season. That's it for this week's Q&A. I will be back next week for a week 2 Q&A, Friday, 4 p.m. Eastern, and look forward to everyone joining in. Until then, the rule is good luck and be a little bit kinder than what's required. I'll see you next time.